Hello Comic-Con, my name is Gabe Hicks. You might know me as Gabe James Games across the internet. I am a cosplayer, voice actor, but primarily, I'm a game designer. So I want to thank you for checking out my panel where we're going to talk about the tabletop industry, getting involved, creating things, and then a few tips and tricks to take with you if you're an experienced member of the tabletop design community, or you're someone who's really just wanting to get involved, wanting to design, wanting to create, and wanting to put things out there. But before we get too involved with that, let me introduce myself a little bit. Currently, I work at Roll20 as the in-house game designer and as a creative producer on the team. So I help to create the first-party content, the new ideas, the new games specifically for our brands and IPs that you'll see on that platform coming pretty soon. On the freelance side, I've worked with Paizo on Pathfinder, the Mwangi Expanse, as well as a few other things that are soon to be announced, and on some of their actual official streams. I've also worked with Grim and Prayerless on Flames of Freedom, the fantasy colonial America game that they launched on Kickstarter, and done some consulting for their safety tool. I've also worked with the Critical Role publishing company Darrington Press on the first release game, Ukatoa. I've even done work with Keith Baker on his Exploring Eberron book that you can find for sale. So that is just a glimpse into some of my experience in this tabletop industry. There are plenty of other projects that I've worked on, but in the most modest way possible, we're not here to talk about the things that I've done. We're here to talk about things that you want to do and how we can make them even better. How we can make it even more involved. How we can make this industry better for you, me, and all of us. So one of the things that is one of the most important aspects for me that I feel like I need to say is that noting that there is space for all of us at this table. And one of the first things that I really want to note is the notion that there is space for all of us at the table. There can be plenty of tables and we're all playing at different ones, but there is space for all of us. This industry is consistently growing at a massive rate. There are new designers every day. And with new designers, there are new players as well. And with the new players that are playing the games that new designers are making, it doesn't mean that the designers aren't still buying and engaging in these games. In fact, designers are some of the most avid people that will support each other. There will be designers that shout from the rooftops the achievements of their fellow designers, their fellow creators, what they're doing. They're supportive because it's the notion that if we succeed together, then we can all do even better. Then we all have more opportunities, then we all have more options, then we all have more creative freedom to work with. And that's amazing. That's something that has made a huge difference for me. The people that support the things that I do and the passions that I have and then just cheering me on and then be able to do the same. When you get to see people rise and it pays off for the work that they're doing, it makes a huge difference. And it's building that community around yourself, involving yourself in the community that you see, because this community, if you want to be a creator in this community, you need to be in this community. And that seems redundant, I understand, but it's not always the case, which is a little sad to me. Something else that is very important and that also might seem a little silly to say, but is really necessary, is that you just need to create. You need to create things. You need to put them out in the world. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be everything that you were hoping them to be, but they need to be out in the world. A prime example is I made a system called the Class Modifier Module, my CMM. It is a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons system I made that I wanted to do ability score increases by class instead of race because of my personal preference on how I wanted it to be. So I wrote up little narrative stories, little narrative choices for how that would be important. Is your character using this weapon or this weapon? Are they more melee? Are they more ranged? And then making the stat bonus increases to that. But I wasn't sure how interesting it was going to be to people. I wasn't sure how excited people were going to be to people. So what I did was I made 4. I wrote 4 of the classes, put them up, made a PDF, put it up on itch.io, which I will come back to. And I just posted on Twitter about it. I was like, hey, here's this thing. I'm really proud of it. I thought it was interesting. Let me know what you think. And I just created. And it was terrifying because you never know how to gauge. You can hope, you can have an idea, you can have analytics that will give you a positive outlook on what it could be, but it's almost impossible to know sometimes. But I just created it and put it out there. I did that in August of last year. 2 months after I did that, from the reaction and support of people, I was actually able to finish doing the other classes. People spent money on it. People donated, people supported it, people wanted to see more and more. They wanted to support me to help make this thing happen. It's something that I was passionate about, something that wasn't what some people would call a complete product, but people were interested and wanted to see more because they wanted to see what I would create next, what else I would create. And in the most modest way possible, but because I like transparency in that sense, in less than a year, that product has made over $20,000 on a pay-what-you-want basis. A pay-what-you-want basis, so it was an optional thing that people could pay for. $20,000. And this industry can be very hard because it's not always very transparent about numbers. But when it comes to my personal work, I try to be. Because that can help motivate someone. That can give someone a gauge. That can give someone a reference that is going to be what makes the difference for them. And that's important. And by the way, you are allowed to create the things that you want to see out in the world. In fact, those things may be some of the most exciting things to have out because you can be passionate about it. You can be excited about it. There will be plenty of times that if someone is hiring you for something, they are hiring you for this idea, but they're also hiring you because they believe that you can do it. What you bring to the table can influence what they want in a positive way. And when you're creating, not everything has to be perfect. There are plenty of ways to succeed without being perfect. The ideas that you have may not have been the intended route that you wanted to go to, but when you roll the dice, you can still succeed even if you didn't expect to. Not every success has to be a critical success. And when you do roll those critical successes, you're even more proud and even more excited. I'm sure it's no shock that some of my earliest projects aren't necessarily my proudest, but I started and created them. I made a tabletop game that was a science fiction role-playing game, and it had, I think, 12 classes and like 12 different species and dozens of items, and I wanted to make the biggest game that I possibly could. And sometimes I go back and look and think, oh no, this was too much. I hadn't given myself a proper sense of scope. I hadn't given myself a sense of, is this fun or could this just possibly be fun? Because there can be a difference. There's the possibility for fun versus actual fun. And they can be very different when you're creating, especially when you're creating games. And part of the reason just creating is so important is because in this industry, years of experience do have weight. They will ask for years of experience when it comes to a lot of official things, and they will reference that. They will reference credits that you have, things that you have created, and the things that you have created and the credits that you have, those two may be intertwined. The majority of your credits may be because of your own creations, and that makes a big difference. People can see it, people can reference it, it's actionable, it's playable, it's interactable. And when you keep making new things, you keep making new experiences, it shows the dedication you have to this craft. It shows the dedication you have to the creation. It shows that after this step and this step and this creation, you kept going. There was not a stop. There was a new, there was an exciting, there was a next step, a next level, something else. It shows that you are consistently making this happen, making this creation process come together. It shows that you can do it and then keep doing it. And when you're creating, let yourself have fun. Again, that seems ridiculous, but games are meant to be fun. You're meant to enjoy them. They're meant to give you a sense of happiness and satisfaction or curiosity and intrigue. And that's why we play these things. So if you can't make something that mimics that, then it's going to be harder. It's going to be you may not be as passionate about it. And you should make things that you care about. You should care about the things that you make. Now, the game industry is, in a lot of ways, flawed in the representation that we have. There aren't necessarily as many people that look like me as I would hope. And I say that in a sense that there are plenty of people who don't look like me that are incredibly talented and don't get enough time of day either. But as designers, we have the opportunity to change that. Because when we get to work in teams, when we get to work with new growth, when we get to work in teams, but as designers, we have the opportunity to change that. When we work with new groups, when we work with new people, we can have a diverse array of voices, a diverse array of input, and it will make our games that much better because of doing it. Perspectives are different with every single person. When you have different gender, when you have different culture, when you have different age, you get those different perspectives, and it will help improve most things that you make. When you're creating, there are dozens of resources out there. And when you have that variety, when you have that diversity and you have that in your game, it's also going to make more people feel welcome. And when more people feel welcome, more people are at the table. And when more people are at the table, more people are interested in the things that you do. More people will buy the things that you make. And more people will be involved in the stuff that you create. This creation and then this sharing and this expansiveness, it is all connected. It all goes together. The more you create and the more you create with variety and diversity and intrigue and excitement and passion, and the more you put it out, the more people will see it. The more that people see it, the more people will be engaged. The more people that are engaged, the more people want to see you make new things, and the more people will support you. And then it is a cycle, and it is a cycle that can actually feed itself. It's a cycle that can sustain itself. This is how the industry grows and expands, and it works for all of us. This is how it can work for all of us. And it also makes a difference getting those new perspectives, because there are things that you may have never even considered. When people make games, there's colors to things almost all the time, but just very rarely a black and white game lately, I'd say, especially for tabletop. And color blindness is a big thing. People will include color blindness in characters or designs, or people may not consider color blindness when they're thinking of character designs, or they're thinking of weapons, or even designs for their books. But color blindness is a big deal that affects a lot of people. And when you're creating and you keep those things noted, you keep those things in your head, you can make a difference for people when you're actively including things that either reference it, acknowledge it, show ways to improve a situation or an experience for someone dealing with that sort of thing. Because the more available you make your games, the more people can play your games. And I said earlier the things that I've done, and it was just listing a few. And I have no notion that I'm not a very fortunate person. I know that I am. I know that I'm very fortunate, and in a lot of ways, I'm very lucky to be where I am and doing the things that I am. I had to go through a point where I had convinced myself that it was primarily luck that got me to where I am. But I had to have a realization. And I hope you can have this and take this with you. When opportunities have been given to me, when things have gone well, luck cannot be the only factor, because the hard work that has to go into the execution, the hard work that has to go into the follow through, and the hard work that has to go into making this thing be out there in the world is not something that can just come from luck. It is hard work and dedication and training a skill. Your creative brain, using that to create, design, and build new worlds and experiences and stories, that is a skill that you are training and cultivating. And keep doing it in creative ways. And that can be writing little stories in a journal. That can be playing tabletop games. Playing Dungeons and Dragons has been a huge boon for me in my storytelling and writing. I have used that to build up my own experience and how I wanted to see new fantasy worlds. Fantasy worlds in the system, or fantasy worlds in entirely different ones of my own creation. So earlier I talked about community, and I actually want to circle back to that. The community when it comes to tabletop design is something that I don't feel like is talked about enough, especially when we're emphasizing becoming and working in this tabletop industry. This community is part of what makes it work. There is an amazing tabletop community, whether you're on TikTok, Twitter, not even social media, but small game clubs or big game groups. There is a community there that is what helps us thrive and strive in this industry. And I'm very fortunate to have met so many people willing to help, wanting me to succeed and wanting to be supportive. And it made it clear to me that it can be a community. It does not need to be a clique. And that happens. It happens everywhere. So it's no surprise that it happens in an industry, but I feel like we need to do what we can to avoid that in a lot of senses. And it's not necessarily surprising, because that can happen in any industry, but it's something that I do think that the more we get involved and the more we create, the more we try to avoid that, the better off we are. Part of how I got involved in this industry was I took a class in college for tabletop game design, and then ended up asking if the person who taught the class would mentor me a bit. And he took me to conventions like PAX Unplugged and Gen Con, and just set me free, set me out to go do whatever, talk to whoever, meet whoever. And I was terrible at networking because I was terrified. It's so overwhelming, and having someone to ask questions to, even my mentor, is hard because not everyone knows what questions they need to ask. They don't know what they don't know. And in this industry, it's either very clear to see what you don't know, or it's impossible to know until it comes up. I never knew where to put my games, and then I learned that there was Drive-Thru RPG, there was DM's Guild, there was itch.io, which is one of my personal favorites. There's the Roll20 Marketplace. Before I even worked for Roll20, I had my class modifier module. I got in contact with them, and then we put it on the Roll20 Marketplace, and people are even still using it. But it was having to figure out where these places are, where I can put these things, and actually getting the resources and understanding of how to do that. So we've talked about a lot, and we talked about just creating and diving into it and then making the community. But I guess one of the things we still need to talk about is what other ways can you get started? Start putting your ideas to paper. Figure out a story that you want or the mechanics that you want to harness. Figure out the ideas that you actively want to put into this game, to put in this idea. Write them down, make a list, use Google Docs, use pen and paper, anything that you need to make this idea partially real. One of my favorite things is I have a notepad app on my phone, and whenever I'm walking my dog, if I'm waking up in the morning, if I have ideas, I'm putting ideas into that notepad. They don't have to be whole ideas, they don't have to be perfect ideas, but I'm putting them down, and I'm writing them, and I'm putting them somewhere so I can come back to them, so I can enhance them, so I can make them better, I can refine them. And then when they're ready, I can execute them. I was going to make a Star Wars reference, but Execute Order 66. When it comes to creating games, you can do it from anywhere. You can do it at your desk. You can do it on your phone. You can do it sitting on the floor with a notepad. And then you execute more after that. You add to it. You figure out the art that you want to do. You figure out the story that you want to tell. You figure out the emotion that you want to invoke. You figure out the game that you want to enjoy. You create it. And there are plenty of places that also make doing it easier. We see that the West Coast is a huge hub for creation. But I live in Pennsylvania. I live East Coast. It doesn't mean that I haven't had to struggle to make it work. But it means that it can work. It means that it's possible and it's plausible. I was working at Target for 3 years. Well, trying to do all of this freelance design stuff part-time. I was working on 4 different projects at once while still working 30 hours a week, and it was exhausting, and it was terrifying, and it was hard. It was hard because I knew what I wanted to do, and then I did what I had to do. And eventually, what I had to do also became what I wanted to do. And it was a struggle, but just creating, putting things out there, and then seeing how people were excited about things that I made, excited about passions that I had, I learned that I could make the games that I wanted to see. I could make the games, the fun, the excitement, the mechanics that I was interested in, and other people were too. Because if you think of it this way, when you're playing a game, someone else made a game and they wanted to make that game. And you enjoy the mechanics, you could enjoy the story, you could enjoy the way it feels, but you're playing something that someone else wanted to make. And this is the way that they wanted it to be. And it's what you want it to be when you enjoy things like that. So when you're making something, you can make a game, an idea, a concept that you want to make, because chances are if you like that, there's going to be other people out there that do too. And you just have to put it into the world. There can be plenty of versions of similar ideas. So what is going to make yours yours? Make the things that are diverse, that are interesting, that are unique. Make the things that are accessible. Make your games accessible for people who may have issues reading certain things. There are fonts for that. There are fonts for people with dyslexia to read them easier. If you don't feel the entire desire to have it just one way, make an alternative version of your PDF that has that accessible font. Accessibility can go hand in hand with the games, and the more accessible your game is, the wider reach it can have. The wider reach it can have, the more people that will play your game. The more people that play your game, the more people that will be able to support you. The more people that will support you, the more opportunity you have. The more opportunity you have, the more you can do the things that you love. And the more you can create. I wanted this panel to remind you that you can do this if you had doubted it. To tell you and motivate you and inspire that you can do this if you ever believed that you couldn't. And for those of you who are experienced designers and have been doing this for so long, I hope that you remember these things. These things, because there will be dozens of videos that tell you, you need to do these specific lists of things. You need to create these things. You need to market to these people. You need to do all this. But we're all just weird dorks playing these games for fun, because that's what we want to do. We can just be people making games and enjoying it. We're all just people. No matter how much I do and how much I create and how much I expand my repertoire or my resume, I'm still Gabe. And that is going to be the most important thing. The games that I make have value because it is Gabe trying to make fun. And from the response that I've gotten, I feel like I'm good at what I do. And I'm going to keep doing the best that I can. I'm going to keep improving because I can always keep improving. There can always be something new. I can make a game of mine more accessible. I can add story to my game. I can add to the experience that I wanted to create and cultivate. There's so many ways that we can do that. So it's just continuing to do that, continuing to create, continuing to expand, and not having to think that it has to be perfect to be a success. And also sometimes decide that perfect might change. I've had dreams of working in this industry for a very long time. And it was more of a dream that it was the kind of dream that felt like it was so far off that I wouldn't actually reach it. And I could even think now that if I looked back and told myself that I was going to be doing everything that I'm doing now, would I have expected it? I honestly don't know. I think I would have had doubts or found it hard to believe, but I would have hoped it was true. And now that I'm here, I realize I want other people to circumvent that experience. I want you to go into this believing that you can do it. And I want you to go into it knowing that it is going to be a challenge, but that challenge does not mean it's impossible for you to make this work. It does not mean this is going to be what you want to do, but you can be a tabletop designer, and the first thing, in my opinion, that you need to do is just start creating. Start creating and then share those things with people. Share those experiences, share those excitements. It can be small. It can be 2 mechanics involving rolling a die. If it's a 1, you win. If it's a 6, you lose. If it's a 2 to 5, you roll again. Add narrative to that. Add story to it. Add little traps. Add plot points. Add extra die if you want to. Get fancy. Get wild. But just create. And when you start creating, you're a designer. And when you have these designs, put them out in the world. Putting them out in the world is terrifying. You never know how people are going to react. Some people will be excited. Some people are going to judge anything that you make, even if it's fun, exciting, and exactly what you wanted. But that doesn't mean you should stop creating. Keep creating beside those points. Because as you have victories, they'll start to pile up. You might have more failures than you have victories, but the victories you can be very, very proud of. This is our time. We can create and tell these stories, and it's going to pay off. I hope, genuinely, that something in this about the talk of community or creating or expanding or testing or adding the diversity and making the accessibility a part of your concepts, I hope at least one of those things sticks with you. I hope that you can be inspired and create. I hope that you have a fire ignited. And I cannot wait to play some of the things that you all are going to put into this world. There is space for all of us at the table, because the table is just getting bigger. And if we run out of space at that table, we'll add more tables. We'll find a new building. We'll do it outside. But there's space for all of us to make these stories told and to have these experiences. My dog is scratching himself in the background. So thank you again, Comic-Con, for having me. Thank you, D4, for letting me talk about this and just put this out in the world. And thank you, all of you, for hanging out with me here. You can find me on the internet at Gabe James Games across the internet. Twitter is probably my primary platform where you can reach out, see the random ideas that I'm posting or some of the stuff that I'm working on. And maybe you'll see a prompt there that inspires you to create something. And if you do, run with it. Make something exciting. Make something you're proud of. Make your success, even if a couple failures come first. And let's make this world, let's make this world fun. Let's put more games in this world. Together. Have a great rest of your Comic-Con.